And today we're going to be going through a very, very serious topic. And I want to make sure that we understand a few things in the Bible as we go through the Bible. However, these things that's being taught throughout the world through different teachers and different preachers have shown you many things that they say based on their studies what things mean in the Bible. And one of the biggest things that is clear in Scripture, it has always been clear in Scripture, is love. Do we really know what true love is? We all want the love of the Most High God. In fact, the Most High God made it clear and showed that what His love is. And as we sit there and we say we love God, we still are seeking love from another and not from God. We have a problem. We have a problem where we look at and we try to justify different things, and it is always the same, because you can always find love on a two-way street. If you truly seeking the love of God, you will find Him on that street. I can assure you. As I'm going to go through this teaching today, something I don't normally do on a consistent matter, where certain words be in the Bible, and I just chosen on my own self to not deconstruct those words. And sometimes I don't deconstruct those words because many people has done many teachings and did them incorrectly by telling you and teaching you lies and telling you things that they speak and read and do other languages, but never able fully to tell you what the truth is. So this teaching is for them who have ears to hear. Let them hear. Because true love, if that's what you're seeking, then today here, you will know what it is, know how it's worked, and know why it was deconstructed for you. So in saying this, we have things that we must do, but first we must show you. We have to show you exactly what many are taught, deceiving you from the truth, but we will see clearly without controversy when they try to tell you, it means this or it means agape, and they have all these words they like to use. They love using those words. And agape do not mean the love of God. So that's why that you seen that video where it shows you those commentaries, those Septuagints, those strong exaltus concordances telling you what love means. And love is one of the simplest words in the Bible to know what it means. And to show you that people still going to continually lie to you. And they'll tell you in the simplest thing. They'll say they speak and do this Paleo Hebrew and can't tell you the direct meaning of what love is. But people want to stay tied to certain things. And as you stay tied to certain things, you're going to always remember everything and every action has a reaction, as with God. So we're going to move forward and we're going to look at some things and we're going to find out something. So we're going to find out the working of love. And then I'm going to show you what love actually is in its simplest form. In its simplest form. And before we do this, we have many Christian type preachers like to come over here and they like to glean and they like to get certain cliches and catchphrases. You had the Michael Holloways and all those type of people. They'll come over here and they'll get these things. They'll take them back and they'll use them in their apologetics doctrine, which is a lying doctrine. And they'll try to incorporate it into what they teach. But you're going to find out today that many people have taught these ways, and you're going to see they lie to you in many different ways. So I'm going to have you look at something, and we're going to look at this and we're going to find out a few things, and then we're going to go into it. So we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 8, and we're going to pick it up at verse 17. Chapter 8 in verse 17. Christ is speaking here, and he's making sure this is clear. And I'm going to try to take my time as much as possible, because I do know we have a class later, but whatever time we in here, I'm going to promise you we're going to go straight to that class. But he says this: I love them that love me. I love them that love me. And there's a semicolon there, so that's the end of that thought there. So the Spirit of God is clearly letting you know he loves you, that love him. The special word love from the Spirit of God is very clear when he says this. But if you truly love the Spirit of God, he will truly love you. And this is why we're going to find out why we're going to see so many other things where people has lied to us. When we look over here at Numbers and look at Numbers chapter 23, and we're looking at verse 19, it says, God is not a man. We have so many different ways you can see this, because people again have lied to you, telling you that God, not the Spirit, God came in flesh, showed he was 100% man, and he was 100% God. This doctrine is so dangerous, it's unreal. But it's telling you that God is not a man that he should lie. It's clearly letting you know he's not a man. Because when it implies it that way, he's telling you, man will lie. Neither the Son of Man that he should repent, hath he said, and shall not do it, or hath he spoken and shall not make it good. This is going to make some things really clear later. Those verses are going to be so clear to you to where you'll never be the same, not from this day forward. A lot of things that we're going to see here, a lot of people going to see what I see, which is a beautiful thing if you truly are seeking God. In 1 John chapter 2, I'm picking it up at verse 15. It says this: love not the world. And that's one of our problems. But he's telling us right up front in the scriptures by John, We are not to love the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of God, of the Father, is not in him. This is clear. This is perfectly clear. We have many people they'll sit there and say they don't love the world or the things that's within it. But how can people sit there and say they don't love the world, but they will create things even as the God? These things we have to look at. We'll sit there and we'll create these things ourselves, and we'll call these things God. Actually, let's look at something. Let's take this thought a little bit deeper. We're going to look at Psalms, and we're going to go to 106. 106, and we're going to see what he says in verse 39. In 39 it says this. It says, "Thus were they defiled with their own works, and went a whoring with their own inventions." With their own inventions. This is what we have done. We got to stop sitting there and always looking at what somebody else did, but we got to look at what we have done. What we have done, because we'll create things, and we'll make those images of these things. And he keep telling you, if you love me, I love them that love me. I want to show you something in the letter of Jeremiah, but it's in Baruch. So we're going to look at the letter of Jeremiah, which is chapter 6 in Baruch. So we go to Baruch chapter 6. It's going to tell you it's a letter of Jeremiah, but we're going to go there. We're going to look at chapter 6, and we're going to go to verse 40 and pick it up there. And we'll see that Christ is saying something here to make sure. It says, "How should a man then think and say that they are gods, when even the Chaldeans themselves dishonor them?" We are men who will make image, and we'll do these things, and we'll make these images. The reason why this is so important, people will go to these buildings that they want to label as churches, and they'll have images and statues of gods. And you see people crying as if this God is God. Many people that are here right now have done that. They'll sit there and pray before an image. Sit there in their own home and pray before a picture. And cry as if that image is God. Verse 41, it gets a little bit clear for us. And it says, "Who if they see one dumb that cannot speak," because that's all it is, "they can bring him and treat Baal that he may speak, as though he were able to understand." You praying to something that you made or someone made somewhere, and you talking to it, you praying to it, and you thinking it understands what you're saying, because it's an image. It's an image. Make promises to this, what you want to ever make it is. And he makes it so clear in verse 42. "They cannot understand this themselves, and leave them, for they have no knowledge." These things have no knowledge whatsoever, but things we have created in the world, including servicing them, doing the works and towards them, and the doctrines of men that tells you what this is being required of this image. This image requires this of you. These are things we do. So he says this, and we make this perfectly clear. And we got to look at that, and we got to see what's happening here. We're going to go to Luke, and we're going to go to chapter 16. Luke, and we're going to go to chapter 16. We're going to go down here. We're going to go to 16, and we're going to pick it up at verse 13. And actually, it's already highlighted. It says, no servant can serve two masters. It's impossible. No servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Clearly letting you know you can't do this. So the same thing is, we got these images on this side, and then we got God on the other side. The stupidest thing in the world is we'll sit there and call those things God. And the worst part is, as we sitting there holding these things as God, and then when people shows you who God is, you have an issue with them. You have an issue with them. I'm going to show you something, and people, if you be honest with yourself, it'll help you out even a greater deal. In John chapter 8, picking it up at verse 42, it says this, that's coming from Christ. In verse 42, let me get rid of this. And we're going to sit there at verse 42. And Yahushua spoke this. He spoke this. And we can even use anyone, even including me, as this example. He said, if God were your father, ye would love me. For I proceeded forth, and I came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. See, many people will sit there and say they love this person who loved God. And if you love that same person that loves God, then that love is true. But you have some people sit there and say they love God, but they hate that person. I want you to understand where we're coming from. I want you to clearly understand where we're coming from and what is happening. And if you see this here, people are sent to do these things for you, but you'll sit there and you'll hold against it. In John chapter 13, verse 34, making it a little bit clearer to bring it closer to you. It says a new commandment. So this is a new commandment I give to you, that ye love one another. Wow. So clearly here, we don't know what love is. He said, love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. So for us to love one another, how? See, people just sit there and they do these cliches. They'll sit there and just say, I love you. Hey, I love you. I love you. But he's saying this because if you love one another, because you're part of the body of Christ. You're part of that one body. Let's look at this. Let's look at something. I want to show you this as we get ready to. I just want you to get these tools in here. before we start tearing this completely down. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, picking it up at verse 12, it says this. And it says, for as the body is one, that's why he's telling you right up front, love one another, because you part of the same body. The eyes can't hate the foot can't hate the arm, the toes can't hate the stomach. Think about that. But it'll say they hate these certain things. For comparing the body as one, and have many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. So when you sit there and you say something, and people have an issue with it, so you would say you love me as you love the Spirit of God. That's what you do. But not knowing what love is, and knowing what love is, and love proves. The word love prove is not understood. It's not understood in this world at all. Love. Because we don't know what it is. We believe it's agape. Whatever agape, however they say agape is, it's this crazy love. But it's clear on what it's saying. See, if true love, and you will know, because another reason why people, or even in my classes, and so much, they want to please God and don't really know the reason why they trying to please God. People in my classes. We run a class that I run that's not attached in the front to where you can see freely on YouTube or these other avenues. But we run classes in the back to where people have talked to me where they don't know why, but they have this fear of God and they try to do everything to please God and don't know why. But they're going to find out why today. And this is the end that I was born, that the spirit that is God has given me, that is in my flesh, to tell you and to profess to you what love is. And your love should be towards God. This is the main reason why I tell you, even when I teach here, and I teach here time and time and time again, I'm going to always point you back to Him. I tell you that I can get you to McDonald's, anywhere else. I can't get you where God can get you. But you have men want to put it on themselves. But as I said, I'm making this clear, and we're going to see that clearly telling you, people telling you that love is agape, the deepest, most intimacy with God, having a deep affection for God, never able to clearly tell you what love actually means. They use the etymology online dictionary, which speaks of feelings of love, romantic reactions. You have the Blue Letter Bible telling you about sexual orientations of love. People use all these different types of tools to assist them. Then you have them same ones as I said earlier. They say they speak Paleo-Hebrew, Greek, all these things, and have no idea what love is, and it's all through the Bible. So we got to break this down. We got to break this completely down. So I'm going to bring up something, and I'm going to break into this here, because I want you to see this. I want you to really clearly see this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a verse. I want to take this verse, and I'm going to sit there and see if I can take it here. And I'm going to sit there and see if I can enlarge it. And I'm going to put the verse what it is. And this is Genesis 37:3. And I'm going to enlarge it a little bit more, just so we can see. And it says this. It says this clearly here. We're going to find out exactly what it is here. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and made him a coat of many colors. People don't know what this is. And they'll sit there and they can't tell you why he's saying love. But we're going to sit there and we're going to make sure this is clear. We want to make sure this is clear. And we're going to make some things real clear for you. Because what we're going to do, we're going to change that one to what it is. This is love. Now, Israel promised Joseph. He promised Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. But he promised him more. And you look at most things, he promised him more. So we need to prove that to where you look over here. We go to Genesis chapter 48. We're going to look at verse 22. And you'll see it here. I'm going to copy that. I need to put that back. Let me put that back here. Let me put that back here, and I'll put that back up. I was trying to put that Genesis back to 48. And we're going to go back to this again. And we'll see here. So Genesis 48:22. And you'll see clearly right here. And you'll run it all through scripture, and it's going to always come up the same. And you'll see, moreover, I given unto thee, one portion above thy brother, which I took out of the hands of the Amorites with my sword and my bow. You see this here all through there, because he promised him this. He promised him this. This is the clear part that we need to know. This is the part that you need to clearly understand what is happening here. And now everything is going to start making more sense. So now we need to go through the Bible and make more sense. We got to see how this works. We want to see how this works now. So now we're going to see things that's going to make more sense now as we go through. Let's look at this. Let's go to Exodus. We're going to look at chapter 19. And we're going to pick it up at verse 5. Let me take this out. It says, let me change this one. It says, now for that reason, if ye obey my voice indeed in works, and keep my covenant, ye should be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. Because why? Because he's telling you right up front. Now you have to promise him. That's what it's based on. Now we know it's clear of obedience of this covenant that you're promising. Let's look at something. We're going to see something to help clear a lot of stuff up for you now. We're going to go to 1 John. We're going to look at chapter 5. And we're going to look at verse 3. 1 John, actually we're on chapter 5. Verse 3. Now we can understand more why it says that. It says, for this is the promise of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. Now that makes more sense when you start seeing it, because this is what he's been saying the entire time. This is what he's been saying the entire time. And this is why you also see this here in Revelations. When you look at Revelations chapter 22, and we look at verse 14, and now why it didn't go there? I want verse. Let me see what it goes. Why I keep doing that? Well, let me see. I might have to put to the next one. There we go. But we still got there. So we look at this, and it says, "Blessed are they that do his commandments." So wisdom is given to them that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates of the city. So wisdom is given to them that do the commandments of God, that they have part of their promise and have the right of the tree of life and may enter through the gates of the city. That's all it's saying. Because when he said, if you obey my voice and do these things, in 8, this is the, we said it. We said this. We said all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. We promised him. We promised God this thing. So again, do we really love who we say we love? Or are you being men pleasers? True lovers, once seeking love eternally, is seeking God. So if one's telling you his love, including putting this in a book, you think you should take the time to learn of God. Why he's telling you. This is why he's telling you these things. Take the time and learn of him, but this is things we don't do. When you see this in Romans, and you'll see this here. Let's look at Romans. We're going to go to chapter 9. We're going to look at something that's real straightforward in verse 4. Because he's telling you right here. Paul, I told you, Paul speaks law. It says, who are Israelites, who pertain to the adoption and the glory and the covenants and giving of the law in the service of God and promises. That's all he's been saying. The promises. This is the main reason Christ came. Let's look at this. It says, I say the truth in Christ. I lie not. My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Ghost, that I have great heaviness and continuous sorrow on my heart. For I wish myself accursed from Christ for my brother and my kinsmen according to the flesh. This is the issue. This is the issue. we don't have the time to play these little games with these things. We don't have the time to sit there to go through this. This is why it's so important to make sure we go through what we need to do. We make a promise to God, we need to follow it. That's why I say, many people who are Christian based, and they still going to use stupid things and saying those are love, and they don't know what love is. And love is a promise. That's why it's telling you this. The promises. The promises of God. So now we know things is a little bit more clear. Let's look at this. Let's look at something. Let's look at Hebrews. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 10. Chapter 10, we're going to pick it up at verse 5. And he says, for it is not possible not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sin. No. He tells you this, wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he says, sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body thou hast prepared me. But why is he saying it that? Why he's telling us right up front, we supposed to have a body, because the problem he has with this entire issue is we promised him this. Actually, let me show it to you. I'm going to show it to you to show you that we did this. And we're going to go to Psalms chapter 26. And I'm going to show you this clear. Psalm 26, and we're going to look at verse 8. We made him this promise. It says, Spirit of God, I have promised, loved, I have promised the habitation of thy house. We promised him our bodies. Now this makes more sense. Now you see why God has the problem he has. Not the blood of bulls and the goats. Why are you offering that? We promised him a body. We promised him a habitation of our house. And it says, in the place where thy honor dwell. We promised him this. Let's look at something. I want to show you something to where we can look at this all together. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus. Oh, it's a rock. Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go here. And I want to pick up at chapter 18. At chapter 18, we're going to go down to verse 22. And to understand that, it's telling you right up front. It says, let nothing hinder thee to pay thy vow in due time, and defer not until death to be justified. Stupidity on top of stupidity when we do that. We should let nothing hinder, nothing block it. Pay your vow. See, a lot of us try to wait to the end of time to try to pay that vow to God. We already promised it to God. This is why I keep sitting there saying, people sit there and tell you about Paul, but Paul is sitting there trying to let you know, because Paul know what law is. That's why he says this right here. Romans chapter 12. I don't know why I didn't go to 12. And I'm going to have to stop using this one. I'm going to have to go to the other one. Romans chapter 12, it tells you this. Clear as day. He said, I beseech thee for that reason, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Why? Because we have promised it to God. We promised it to God. We are promised to do these things. So we need to pay that vow. The same reason when you sit there and you paying that vow, and you have people who will sit there no matter what, when you keeping that covenant to God, not to people, keep it to God. Now you know why when even the people of God, they sat there and when they seen even Yahushua mother them, desiring to speak with them, Yahushua had to pay his vow to God. See, let's look at it to where we don't want no sugarcoating anywhere. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 12. And let's look at this. I want you to clearly get what he's talking about and what's going on. We're going to pick it up at verse 47. Because everybody would like to sit there and say something different about this, but we got to look at it as its entirety. And it says this, and one said unto him, remember thy mother. Because he was speaking to him, but thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. To stand. See, stand without. See, we got to understand what these words mean. We don't know what the words mean. You don't know what they're saying. They just saying they just thought they wanted to speak, but no, they stand without. They standing against the case because it says without. Destitutes and absence from what it was of the body, which was Christ. Because everybody, some of them didn't come to the truth until Yahushua was killed. I'm talking about his brothers, including his mother, even though she was told what this man was. See, people miss this. But they stand without desiring to speak with them. And he clarifies this and makes it more clear right up front. Watch what he says here in verse 48. But he answered and told them, who is my mother? Who is my brother? They over there. No, he's not. They ain't over there. Who is it? Who is it? See, Moses said something, and he said he was going to be just like Moses. And I'll show you what Moses did. Let me show you what Moses did. I'm going to show you something Moses did. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 32. And we're going to see something what Moses did. Moses 32, we're going to look at verse 26. Moses is right up front. Then Moses stood at the gate of the camp and said, who's on the Spirit of God's side? Let him come unto me. Who's on his side? Not who's on Moses' side. Who's on the Spirit of God's side? Come over here. They standing without. They standing without. So he's saying this right here. He said, and he stretched forth his hands towards his disciples and said, remember my brother and my brethren. He makes this clear. No question, no differences. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father, which is in heaven, is the same is brother and sister and mother, keeping the promises of God. That's who his family is. That's why he made himself clear. If you ain't doing them, he's saying you ain't related to him. You're related by flesh, but you ain't related by spirit. Flesh is temporary. Spirit is eternal. That's ever. Let's look at something. I want to show you something here as we get ready to where I'm going to show you a parable in a minute. In Ezekiel, we're going to look at 3. We're going to look at verse 16. And I want to show you. It says, and it came to pass at the end of 7 days, the word of the Spirit of God came upon me, saying, so 7 days passed, which this message came to you. Sabbath, Sabbath. But we want to see something here in verse 17 that is clear. It says, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. But most people don't know what a watchman actually means. Again, another word. We don't know what it means. Another word that Christians and people alike then use what a watchman is in the wrong context, form, shape, and fashion. We're going to find out what watchman actually means. Because a watchman is a eunuch. They'll tell you a eunuch is a castrated, all kind of stuff. Again, coming from Christian doctrine. Coming from Christian doctrine. And a eunuch is a chief. But we're going to find all this out. So he made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. For that reason, hear the word that my mouth and give them warning from me. He didn't say, come tell them that I love them. No, you made a promise to God. So he said, no, you give them warning because they need to be keeping this promise. When I come back, make sure they done kept that promise. Because they ain't kept that promise, I'm going to do them in. Because you promised me. See, now it makes more clear. See, it even says this when you look at Exodus. In Exodus chapter 23. See, because he said, give them warning of me. It ain't the first time he did this. This is not the first time this came up. We look at this and we'll look at this in Exodus chapter 23, verse 21. This ain't the first time he said this. It says this, beware of him and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Really? Really? Beware of him ain't saying come in, he gonna love you and all put all this loving on you. No, you beware of him. Because he's gonna give you warning of me coming. He don't know when I'm coming. As you don't know. But when I come, when I get there, I'm there. And when I'm there and you ain't ready, I'm going to do you in. You promised him. But let's look at these eunuchs. I want to make sure we're clear on these eunuchs as we continue. We're going to look at Isaiah chapter 56. Chapter 56. We're going to look at verse 4. And it says this. For thus saith the Spirit of God unto the eunuchs, these chiefs, that keep my Sabbath and chose the things that please me and that take hold of my covenant. You see this? Now it's a lot clearer. But watch this. Even unto them will I give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than the sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. This is clear, bro. This is clear as day. Because that's all he's been talking about the entire time. So the problem we have here, you have these eunuchs, chiefs, and you have them, they're in these leadership positions, preparing and supposed to be preparing you for the king. So you have eunuchs who works for Satan. You have eunuchs who works for God. And you have eunuchs who going to make sure the Sabbath be being kept, doing what they're supposed to do. And you got eunuchs who going to sit there and going to please Satan. So to him that is over the house of the God within the walls, get the better name for the children of Israel, everlasting name. Eunuchs should be always preparing you for the king, not for themselves. Follow that. Follow that truth. Many of them prepare you for themselves, which is contrary. And this is the problem. Let's look at something. Let's look at something a little bit deeper. And it goes sit there. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to pick this up again at verse chapter 20, just to show you what's going on. Chapter 20, picking it up at verse 4. Look at this. I'm talking about, it's clear as day. It says, comparing is the lust of a eunuch to deflower a virgin. And that's the end of that thought. But the reason it's saying that because he's a chief. Meaning what? The lust of that eunuch, that chief, he can be a pastor, a teacher, a man calling himself a shepherd, a bishop. They want to call themselves whatever in this chief position. To deflower one of his. To deflower them. Sitting there telling you how you to love your pastor in this way, making promises to them is what you're doing. You have these pastors that sit there want to take the women who then shared their hearts on if they was having some issues with their husband, and they'll take that and defile that woman. You see them just, all you gotta do is look at the TV. A lot of us like to watch some of those same pastors. We had some of them same pastors. You love me, you need to be giving me some money. You show me how much you love me by how much you give me. They deflowering you. It's right here, clear as day. It says, so is he that execute judgment with violence. His doctrines and his teachings that he's going to do. Put you out, do all these things to you. But they deflower you by doing that. Deflower you by doing that. Let's look at something. We're going to go to the Wisdom of Solomon and look at this a little bit deeper. In Wisdom of Solomon chapter 3, picking it up at verse 14. And it says, and bless, wisdom is given. That is the eunuch. He's the chief. He's the chief. Which is his hands has wrought no iniquity, no acts of sin, nor imagine wicked things against God. Interesting is that. For unto him shall be given a special gift of faith and an inheritance in the temple of the Lord, more acceptable to his mind. Interesting, isn't it? And they'll tell you a eunuch is a castrated man. Stupidity that we'll hold on to. But that eunuch is to prepare you for who they are. and who you're going to be. So we know this in how eunuchs comes out is this. We're going to know this right here. And I know some people probably shocked on that because people, that's what you taught. And it actually is in some of your commentaries as they lie to you. And as those preachers lie to you. In Matthew chapter 19, picking it up at verse 12, it says this, and it makes this clear from Yahushua, makes this perfectly clear. And it says this, for there are some eunuchs. So there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb. And they will tell you, oh no, some was born, didn't have private areas. That's stupidity again. Some was born chiefs from the womb. And there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men. Some was born and then people seen leadership qualities in them and they made them chiefs. It's clear. But it goes on more. And it says, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. So you have some who put themselves in the position knowing that they knew what they knew and end up putting themselves in that position for the sake of the kingdom to teach you what the words are. If he that is able to receive it, let him receive it. It's clear. This is clear. See, it tells you this over here in John 17:9. This is why it's so important. John 17:9. We're going to look at John and we're going to pick it up at 17 and 9. John 17:9, and it says this. It says, I pray for them, I pray not for the world. Eunuch, this is the thing they do, but not for the world. But for them that thou hast given me, for they are thine. For these are his. See, being in greater knowledge of Christ, you only can pray for them that they can receive this knowledge that God has given you to give to them and giving them warning that the Most High God is coming. It's clear. It's nothing, not rocket science. Because he's holding you to where you made this promise. And what we need to do. This is the thing is. This is what we make sure of. These are the things that we look at. See, and he says a little bit more here when we look at verse 10. In verse 10, it says this. And we'll sit there and see, it says, and all mine are thine, and all thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. The word of God is glorified in them because then they're going to keep on to the promise. God. See, the same thing as a mother and father, you sit there and you'll see what it goes on with wars and different things. It's like a mother tells her child about the father that was killed in war. See, the parent can tell you about another parent that has died or not coming back at that time, but they'll sit there and tell the child about this parent. And the child can fall in love with the parent, even though they never seen the parent, but they love that parent for whatever that reason was spoken of. So that little girl falls in love with her father, even though she had never seen her father, she only heard of him. So we need to look at this in a parable format, because you have to be as a little child to understand the parable. Him who you seeking, him who has given this type of a promise. So I want to show you something. We're going to look at a parable and we're going to see something here. We're going to go to Matthew 19. We're going to pick it up at verse 13. And it says this, and let me unmove that. We're going to sit there and see this. And it says, when they were brought unto him little children. And it says that he should put his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. Why? These little children coming. But for whatever reason there was, they decide to rebuke the children. But Yahushua made something clear, because we want to understand how love works, and we got to find out how it works. And you have to have that same belief as a little child to understand how it works, because a promise is promise. That same thing as you have a mother or father. If you tell a little 6-year-old child and you promise them whatever you promised them, and another person can sit there and tell that child, no, they're not going to do this. I don't care how much you can tell them this. That child going to look at you and know, I know when my mommy or daddy get back, that promise is going to be fulfilled. This is automatic. That's the belief of that child from their parent. So let's look at this. And Yahushua said the same thing. He says, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such the kingdom of heaven. You got to have the same kind of faith, the same kind of understanding that you got to come into. And if you have this understanding that where you're going to see these promises in the promise of a child to where you cannot break them from that promise. It's impossible. A little child. It's impossible to break that little child. So you train this child based on promises from this child, and that child understand what a promise is, because they know mommy and daddy, no matter what you do, that child, you tell that child, I promise you, when we get home, we're going to go here. I promise you, that child going to know it, and you cannot change this child. Period. Because you promised them. You promised that child. Let's look at something. I want to show you something. To where we're going to understand this. We want to look at something. I want to show you something that's really clear here. In Proverbs chapter 2, in verse 6. See, the Bible even tells you, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he should not depart from it. So when you promise this child in the way he should be going, when that child get old, he'll never depart from that. You promising that child on things that they need to be doing. You promise them. Just like the recite here. I'm going to show you a recite here. Let's look at this. We're going to look at Genesis. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to look at verse 23. And this is how you hold on to it. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And she should be called woman because she was taken out of man. So it's holding you the same thing. So this child is based on this promise, should never change. This is now part of your bone, part of your flesh. This is how you're going to go from here out. This is how this is going to go from this point forward. Love. Preparing you for the kingdom. Based on love. Based on the promises that God has spoken. So how do this work out if we want to look at a parable in this? Let's look at this. Let's look at the promise. Let's look at the promise of God. The love of God. We're going to go to Luke chapter 10, pick this up, and we're going to roll down through there. And we're going to sit there, Luke chapter 10, we're going to pick it up at verse 35, and we're going to see how this promise works, how it works. And it says this, and it says, on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, 1 penny, 2 pence, 1 penny. I don't know what the commentaries tell you, but that's only 1 penny. Adds up to 1 penny. 2 pence. 1 penny. And he gave it to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Wow. That's interesting, isn't it? So he left him back to these prophets and to these eunuchs. He put them there to where they got to sit there and they got to take care of them. In the way they should go. So when they get old, they won't depart from who Christ is. Let's look at something. We just going through, and we're going to look at John chapter 14. And we're going to look at John 14. We'll pick it up at verse 18. And it says this, and he tells you right up front. This is what he left you. He says, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. By word is how he's coming to us. By word. It was told to everyone that you're nothing. See, people will tell you these things, and because you're holding on to a promise of God. Because God said he loved you. He promised you something. So people will sit there by that same word. They'll tell you you're nothing because you're holding on to something that you can't see, feel, or touch. But his word is with you. It comforted you. So family members will disown you. His word was with you when your husband or your wife felt they didn't love you or had the same love towards Christ. He will not leave you comfortless. He knows how people feel about this exact situation. He knows how people feel. And let's look at this all together. We're going to go over here to Mark. And let's get some clarification here. We're going to look at Mark and get this a little bit better understanding here. And with Mark, it says this. It says, ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Because you're holding on to this name. They can't touch it. They can't feel it. They can't see it. They're going to hate you. Because you're holding on to, no matter what, to this promise that you was trained up for. And you're going to be hated. But he that shall endure to the end, you have to endure some things. You have to endure some. So he's telling you right up front, right now, you have to endure some things. You're going to be sitting alone many times. Because now you know what the truth is. But you have to sit and wait for that promise to come. And people will hate you for that. They will hate you for this. In Romans chapter 8, picking it up at verse 24, we're going to go to 8 and 24 and look at this a little bit closer. You got to look at this a little bit closer. It says this. It says, wherefore God had gave them up to uncleanness, though the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. See, they try to promise you with things you can't see, but why promise them? And you can get the promise yourself. They try to promise you things you can see. And not things you cannot see. These are things we do. And when you do these things, you look at this, and we're going to go right here. We're going to go to this. It says, we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why do ye hope for? Why? Because we have to endure some bad things until the end comes for reaching the promise of God. We can't reach him in flesh. It's impossible. But he said, but I'm going to give you a promise, but my name is going to be with you, but you got to, for my name's sake, people is going to hate you. People are going to hate you for this. Because when you really know what my promise is, people is going to hate you for this. Christ came to people of the promises, but many had a problem with that when they really heard what the promises are. Obey my voice. But let's see this. You see he says this out of his own account. Out of his own account, we see it here. In John chapter 1, picking it up at verse 11, it says this. It says he came into his own, and his own received him not. He came to us. He came to us. A lot of us, we chose not to. Couldn't see it. You couldn't see it. They didn't want the promise. They didn't want the promise like mommy and daddy do. They want something they can see. So it's the same as when you can see it, you're rich. I want you to keep that in mind. When you can see it, they're rich. So I'm going to show you something in a story form to where we can sit there and understand this parable in its fullness. We're going to go to 2 Samuel, and we're going to look at 2 Samuel. We're going to pick it up at chapter 12. We're going to start at verse 2. And I want you to take the time, and I want you to meditate on this as we do this. And it says, and now remember, the king walketh and old and gray-headed. Actually, that's the wrong one. I want 2 Samuel. That's the one. Wrong one. I'm sorry. So I read it. I said there. So now we got to go 12 and 2. And it says this. It says, the rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds. Why? Because it came unto him, there were two men, two. One in the city, one rich, and one the other poor. One rich, one poor. See, one is rich of things you can see because you can physically see his wealth. The other one is poor because you don't see his wealth at all. You can't see it, but he's wealthy, but you can't physically see it. But the one that you see that is rich, you can see it. Because the rich man had exceedingly many flocks you can see them. Because it's of the flesh. And it's the same as you see here. Because a lot of people is rich in the flesh. Many people. So when things of the flesh is made known, you'll see what they are. And it tells you right here. in Galatians chapter 5. And we'll look here. And this says, now the works of the flesh are made known, which are these. Now, the wealth, you can also use right there. The wealth of the flesh is made known. The wealth of it. The wealth of the works, the wealth of what you're doing is made known this way. So now the wealth of the flesh are made known, which are these. The many flocks of adultery, and fornication, and uncleanness, and lasciviousness. Exceedingly many. Idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, ill emotions, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies. The wealth of this you can see. Envy, murder, and drunkenness, rivalries, and such like. He was wealthy in this. He was wealthy in this. This is rich because you can see these things openly. The poor man, you don't see anything. He has nothing. He has nothing. We look at these things and try to understand how these things work out in life. You know, I guarantee a second. Let's go here, then we're going to go to chapter 8, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We're going to pick it up at verse 9. And it says, but we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God that raises the dead. See, when we can sit there and we can see the things we can hold on to, that's trusting in ourselves. Trusting in ourselves. So we should trust in God that raises the dead. So Christ did something, which we're going to see in a second. Now I'm going to see if I can get over it. Let's see if that one might not do it. I'm going to have to go over to this one. And we're going to go over here. Yeah, still want to do that. So let's do this. So we're going to go over here. So we're going to sit there and see something else. Something else that he did. Because between a rich man and a poor man, things you can see versus something you cannot see. For ye know that the grace of our Creator, salvation, Christ, the Anointed One, that though he was rich, he was rich. It's loaded. But for our sakes, for your sakes, he became poor. You have two men in the city. One rich, has adultery and fornication, all he can offer you, and one poor. And he showed up poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich. See, he didn't want nothing to entice you. Let's look at something. I want to show you something and make sure that we are on the same page here. In James chapter 2, and we're going to pick this up at verse 8. In verse 6 I want. Verse 6, join in chapter 2. Verse 6. But it tells you this. Ye have despised the poor. We despise the poor because he's poor. He only could tell you things, but he can't show you nothing. Do not the rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seat? You tell me they don't do this? When you have people who has a lot of money, they did do this exact same thing. They can be poor, but once they become rich, now they word become a lot of weight in this world, because flesh loves flesh, being of this world. It says this to where we can make sure we all on the same page here, because we don't want to sit there and sugarcoat nothing for you. We don't need to sugarcoat nothing for you. In John chapter 15, we're going to pick it up at verse 19. We don't have to sugarcoat it here. And we'll sit there. It says, if ye were of the world would love his own. So if you love the things of the world going to love his own. So if you love the things you can see, the adultery, fornication, all that stuff there, the world going to love you. But the problem is, if you hold on to a promise, they can't see it, but they just see you holding on to something they have a problem with, because ye are not of the world. But I, who Christ, have chosen you out of the world. For that reason, the world hateth you. That's why they hate you, because you're keeping on to this word. So he had to do something, which we're going to find out that's going to trip a lot of people out with this story, with this very story, on what Christ did. In Christ, he had to do something to make this work out. We're going to look at it. For Christ had to forsake us. And you have Christians that tell you he didn't, and he did. He had to forsake us for a little while as he was poor in this world. So he had to forsake his richness and had to do it as a poor person. So for a little while, he forsaked us in this world. We're going to see this. And I'm going to say it again. He forsaked us. However, the Most High God must let this happen as if he's not seeing the things of the flesh. So let the flesh take back what is his, and he can take back what belongs to him. This is what had to happen. See, it's not like they don't know who he is. They know. But they hold on to something. So we're going to see these all. Everything I'm showing you, we're going to see. And even the forsaken part, we're going to see that clear. And we're going to look at something. We're going to go to John. Let's go to John real quick. We're going to go to John chapter 6. And we're going to look at verse 42. Verse 42. And he says, and I beheld and brought him to Yahushai. Got the wrong one. We need this one. As soon as that hit, we need 6 in verse 42. That's the one right there we want. And they said, is not this Yahushai? Because the people knew who he was. But they're going to show you even more so they know who he is. The son of Joseph. The son of Joseph. Whose father and mother we know. Who they know. They telling you who they know him. Whose father and mother we know. His father is Joseph. How is then that he said, I come down from heaven? They clearly didn't get it, did they? But I want us to get it today. See, God loved us and he promised us, and promises of God. So we are to keep this no matter what. Keep his word. Some will judge us according to our appearance in all kind of different ways. And the Bible tells you clearly here, you don't do that. You don't do that at all. In John chapter 7, we're going to pick it up at verse 24. He tells you right up front. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Just because he can show up one way doesn't mean you just judge him based on what you see. See, in verse 25 it says, and then some of them of Jerusalem, is not this he whom they seek to kill? Because he judging righteously? Because he's judging righteously? See, because if he's judging righteously and you want to kill him, he's telling you right up front, then the word of God is not in you. It's not there. You even see it here. In John chapter 5, picking it up at verse 36, it tells you this. In 36, it tells you. Right here, it lets you know. It says, but I have greater witness than John, than the works which I have given me to finish. The same work that I do bear witness of me that the Father sent me. There's a greater witness. A greater witness. But as he's sitting there saying these things, we know what's going on, because Yahushua was clearly a prophet and a eunuch from the womb. Clearly this. In 8:37, watch this, and we're gonna see something where this greater witness is running. With this greater witness, we're gonna go to 37. We're gonna come back, and we're gonna. Oh, wait, this is not 8 over here. So let me run it over here. So we're gonna go to John 8:37. And to show you what he's talking about. And as he said even here, they're not going to actually switch over there. But as he's sitting there letting you know that I speak which I have seen of my Father, and ye do what you've seen of your father. But he's saying that because you clearly know, I know that ye are the seed of Abraham, because many of us is from the seed of Abraham. But you still seek to kill him because the word have no place in you. Has no place. So we look back over here and we see in 26, it says, but lo, he speaketh boldly, and they say nothing to him. Do the rulers know indeed in works that this is the very Christ? So we got a problem. And we're going to look at this in verse 3 in his story. 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 3. It says, but the poor man had nothing save one, which his save is only telling you only one little Jew lamb. One Jew lamb. One Jew lamb. You see that here, even with John chapter 1. John chapter 1, when you look at verse 29, it says, the next day John said, Yahushua coming unto him, he says, behold, the Lamb of God, which take away the sin of the world. That one Jew lamb. That one follower of Christ. Right up front. And he had to appear as this poor man, having nothing. Only got one lamb. But we still know one thing, and never forget this. Never forget this. Because he said he was rich. He became poor for our sakes. But this you make sure you remember. And you keep this in your mind. In Psalms chapter 50, in verse 9, we'll start at verse 10. We'll do it that way. At verse 10, it says, for every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. See, he's loaded. He's loaded. Don't let him fool you. He's loaded. He says, I know all the fowls of the mountain and all the wild beasts of the field are mine. But he became poor for our sakes. See, Christ cannot come directly for us in this way. For good reason. See, if he came and he came with his wealth, everybody would run to him. Tell me they won't. Everybody will run to him. So he can't come that way. Let's see something. I'm gonna show you why he can't come. You can see that right now. You can see some of these guys who these rappers and all this and that. Women wouldn't give them the time of day if they were just regular. But once they become wealthy, they give them the time of day. Now they're wealthy. So it says this in Ecclesiasticus chapter 12, and we're going to pick it up at verse 8. It tells you this. It says, a friend cannot be known in prosperity. Cannot. So he can't come rich, because he come rich, he going to get a whole lot of false friends. This is clear. If he was loaded, he'd have them by the drovefuls. You see people right now, they done switched it out. You see these men who became wealthy and now they sit there and they shows up with billions and millions of people and they sit there and just throw money on top of money on money on money on money to this person. A friend cannot be known in prosperity, and an enemy cannot be hidden in adversity. That's a proven statement. That's a proven statement. See, in this is why he coming this way and why he came that way. We're going to find out more why he did that. We're going to go to 2 Corinthians, picking it up at chapter 8. We got to look at chapter 8. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, now that one want to do it too. I might have to close out and open them back up, but that's okay. We'll go over here to chapter 8. We're going to look at 8. We're going to look at 9. So he says this. He says, I speak not by commandment, but by the occasion and forwardness to others, and to prove, it's key, to prove the sincerity of your promises. That's deep. To prove this. But watch this. He's making some things clear here. For you know that the grace of our Creator of salvation, the Anointed One, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes He became poor. Why? To prove something, and through his poverty that you might be rich. Why? Because he had to prove something. See, and prove something, and he had to prove what? Your sincerity. Your sincerity. He's telling you this right here. Sincerity means your honesty. That's all it means, your sincerity. Your honesty, your motives, your genuineness, your integrity. He had to do this. Because if he wouldn't have done it, do you know how many people would flock to him because he has everything? They'll flock to him by the thousands. By the thousands. It says this over here, even Ecclesiasticus. I'm going to show you something, even Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go to chapter 10. Let me see. Hopefully it go to 10. Yeah, go to 10. Went to 10. So we're going to look at 10 in verse 30. And it tells us this. It says, the poor man is honored for his skills, and the rich man is honored for his riches. I don't even know what to say there. You call a poor man because you need your car fixed, but you gonna call a rich man just to see how he doing because he got that money. They honor a rich man, any kind of. We're going to tell you what, let's go here to chapter 12. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to chapter 12 because I want to show you something, just to make sure we all clear on the same boat. We're going to look at Ecclesiasticus chapter 12. And we're going to tell you what, I might have that one off a little bit. I think I do. I might be off a little bit. But it's right here. It says, when a rich man speaketh, every man holdeth his tongue. That's a true statement. You have one of the dumbest men walking the face of this earth was president for 4 years. Donald J. Trump was dumb as a bag of rocks. Dumb as he is. You have many people here right now voted for him. People did what? And people, they'll hold their tongue against him, and they took what he said and they extolled it to the clouds. Extolled, that's all this means. They praised it. They gave thanks for what he was saying, even though he was disrespectful in everything he did. You had many blacks voted for this racist man. They extolled him because he was rich. You will extol rappers and singers and all kind of people because they're rich. But it tells you this. But if the poor man speaks, they say, what fellow, who in the world is this? Who are you? Poof. You ever see them girls do that? Poof. Disappear. And if he stumble, they will help to overthrow. They stumble, they're going to kick you in the back to make sure you hit the ground. This is what you did to Christ. One true lamb. Getting to the point of what's going on. So the Most High God shows up as this poor man. Who in the world is this broke dude? What has he done for me lately? He can't even buy me a piece of gum. That's why it says this. I'm gonna show you something. I just want to make sure we clearly get what's going on. So it ain't no questions between it. Yeah, we're gonna go to Mark. Mark chapter 10. We're gonna pick it up at verse 25. That's why Acts is highlighted. It says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven," including the people that follow it. You got fools going to follow this person. He speaketh his tongue, you'll hold it. Just shut up and listen to whatever he got to say, and you'll extol that man. But when the poor man speak, who are you? You ain't nobody. You ain't nobody. Who are you? So he had to check that. So that's why he had one lamb, one Jew lamb, a follower of Christ. And he bought that one lamb with his lifestyle. Actually, let me show you this. Let me show you how complex Paul is. I'm going to show you what Paul did. Show you how complex Paul is. He's a complex brother. And we're going to go to, it didn't do it again. We're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. We're going to pick it up at verse 20. Because he tells you this. And he's just doing it in these roundabout ways. It says, "For ye are bought with a price. For that reason glorify God in your bodies." See, you're bought for a price. See, because when we promised our habitation to him, and he made promises to us, so we can be glorified through him, and we're going to be glorified in our bodies, in your spirits, which are God's. See, the life of Christ is nourished up and grew up with him. So as we learn, we eat. So the same you see over there when we looked at John 1:29, that one ewe lamb was tangled in flesh. That one lamb was tangled in flesh. Let's show you this. Let me show you some silhouette pictures that you see. We're gonna go to Genesis chapter 22. We're gonna look at verse 12. And we'll sit there and see here. And it says, and when he said, "Lay not thy hand upon the lad." So an angel telling Abraham, because the Spirit of God said, "You're going to sacrifice Isaac unto me." Then once he seen Abraham was going to actually follow through with the act, he told, "No, lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything unto him. For now I know that thou desirest God, and I see that thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son." He didn't withhold that flesh. He didn't withhold that flesh. So he did something, and he said right here. So everything here has a meaning. So Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and remembered behind him was a ram caught in the thickets by his horns, by his lineage, which many of us depends on this day. The lineage that we go through. He was caught on by the lineage. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So the Most High God allowed the rich man to give what is his. But you see, Abraham was willing to give up his. And God is loaded with these. He said every cattle upon 1,000 hills belong to him. Abraham only had one ewe lamb. So if he comes to you rich, look what people do. Hey, Lord, go on, you give me one. You got me. So let's look at this. So there's one ewe lamb he brought, nourished up, and grew up together with him and with his children, and did eat of his own meat, and drank his own cup, and laid in his own bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. That's interesting, isn't it? This is highly, highly interesting. Raised up a ewe lamb compared to a daughter. Interesting. So you have some rich men going to sit there and take it out. See, but you see, the rich man, which was of Christ, you sit there and say, no, no, Abraham, no, you don't have to take this. No, don't do that. I use one of mine. But a rich man here sees it differently. That's why we check them. That's why he had to try you that way, to see what you was going to do. So watch this. Let's go back over here and let's look at this. Let's look at verse 4. And it says it, and there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take his own flock of his own herd, and dressed it for the wavering man, and coming unto him, but took the poor man's lamb, and dressed it for the man that was come to him. Interesting, isn't it? This man had one lamb. One. Dressed it. The Lord had the cattle upon 1,000 hills. He told Abraham, hey, I want you to do this willingly. Abraham would. He said, no, hold up. No, bro, I see you dead serious, man. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Let me, here's one. You do this. See, when you can do something like that, you can see the differences. See, the same thing, let's look at something, what happened with David. I want to show you something with David. We're going to look at David real quick. We're going to look at David chapter 11. We're going to go to 11. We're going to pick it up at verse 15. See, David did something because he wanted Uriah's wife, who was Bathsheba. So Uriah had one wife. One. And David wrote a letter because he slept with Uriah's wife, but he put a letter in there and set it and set Uriah in front, to set Uriah in front of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. Because he had got Bathsheba pregnant. And you don't see why God had to take him out. David was rich. Loaded. Supposed to have one wife, but he can do whatever he wants. But he wanted to take out this one man's wife. So he's going to kill the man. We see this where you see here in Daniel. Is why he can't show up rich. Because he wants to see where your heart is. He has to see what he's dealing with. In Daniel chapter 9, picking it up in verse 26, it says this. It says this. It says, after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off. He's going to be killed, but not for himself. Wow. not for himself. So how many of us has going to offer up? We read, but we offer him up. Time and again. You go in many places, these buildings they call churches. They say he died for all the future sins you're gonna do. Time and again. We have fun, then we die. And we want to put all that on Christ. And he said he will be cut off not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come and shall destroy the city and sanctuary. So now you see what you're destroying. Clearly as day. In the end there shall be with a flood. Many doctrines going to be out there. And unto the end of the word desolations are determined. Because based on that promise, you will know if you promise God or not. And many people is adhering to a whole nother thing. So the word and what you say altogether died. Christ died. But how do it die? He don't die, but what you do, you put it out of sight. Let's make sure we understand this. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians again. We're going to go to chapter 15. We're going to look at 15, and they didn't want to go. So we're going to get over there another way. So we're going to go to 15, and we're going to look at verse 3. And it says this. It says, for I delivered unto you the first of all, which I also received, how Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. So how did he die? See, people sit there and tell you these things, but they sit there where you died, but they can't tell you physically how you died. Because the spirit can't die. So the spirit can't die, but it's saying right here, so it's telling you something that is absolutely true. So how did it happen? How did it happen? Let's see. We got to see how it happened. Because it's saying right there it happened. So we see this here in First Maccabees. And it says this. It says, and when they had rent to pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. So Christ didn't die, but it was removed from your sight, so it was as dead. The same as when we are removed from God, we're going to be as dead away from God. So we got to believe, we got to know something. As this lamb was dressed. So we need to know something. What he's about. So he had to set this up. This had to be completely set up for us to see what happened. So it says this even in right at the beginning. It says, who have believed our report? To whom is the arm of the Spirit of God revealed? So who has this went to? Because I made some statements earlier. I said God had to forsake you. I'm saying that again because we got to see this. But who going to believe that report? Because he has to prove to you to see who you are. He had to see this. Based on the love, the promise of this story. Verse 2, it says this. It says, for he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, as comparing a root out of dry ground, have no form, no comeliness, or when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Why? He's poor. In the form, meaning no structure, not to what you see, or shape or fashion. No, not to what you see. You see adult fornication, lasciviousness, and all these other things. You don't desire to keep a promise. That's not your style. But he's testing us. He's testing us to see what we will do. And it tells you in verse 3, he is despised and rejected of men, of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. He's acquainted with grief. Are you kidding me? Acquainted mean to learn, to realize the experience of man's sorrows. Acquainted with that. And we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. We hid our faces from him. We are despised, being caught up between a rich and a poor. Between the rich and the poor. See, let's look at this. And we esteemed him not. I want to just show you, make sure we're clear. I don't want no one to think that we're trying to pour something over on you. We're going to go to Luke chapter 23. We're going to look at this in 28. We're going to look at this. It says, and Yahweh turned to them and said, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. You don't esteem me because I'm poor. I don't have the wealth that you see, that you seek. I don't have that. But he's rich. But you just don't know it. Because he wants to see who truly loves him. And he loved them. So Christ did some things to do this. So in verse 4, he tells you clearly. He says, surely he had borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. He carried our sorrows, our pain, and valued him stricken, smitten of God, the strike, and afflicted the plagues of God. So the Spirit of God lets this in the flesh and what these things happen. So for that small little moment, he had to forsake us. This moment that we're in today. But God promised. And we hid that promise deep in our hearts. So we're going to endure much evil. It's the same way you can picture yourself laying on the ground and you have something as people beating you for you to get off, and you just laying on the ground, you just holding it because you're not going to get up. And they just going to beat you so you can get off of it. So we come into the tail of this understanding. In Matthew chapter 19, it says this in verse 28. It says this. It says, verily I say unto you that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, you followed him in the regeneration. So if you followed him, you loved him, you promised Christ, and in the regeneration, meaning the restoration, the renovation of what's going to go on. So in the restoration, meaning what? So in the regeneration, that's why he's saying, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit upon the throne of his glory. Why? Because he's saying that. I'm going to show you why he's saying what he's saying. That many people have taught so wrongly And we got to straighten all these things out so many times. And we see this in Revelations. And we got to go over here to chapter 21. We got to see chapter 21. And we got to start right here in verse 1. It says, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man should sit on his throne in his glory, and I saw the new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and first earth was passed away, and there was no more sea. Now in the new generation, I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Isn't that interesting? As he's sitting upon his throne. 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So you got to remember what those tokens are. And we'll see what these tokens are in 2nd Esdras. We'll sit there and we'll see this here. 2nd Esdras. 2nd Esdras. And we got to go down to chapter 7. We're going to pick it up at verse 26. And it says this. It says, remember, the time shall come that those tokens which I have told thee shall come to pass, and the bride shall appear, and she coming forth shall be seen, and that now is withdrawn from the earth. Right now it's just withdrawn from the earth. And it goes on more, a little bit more. It says a little bit more. Verse 27. And it says, and whosoever is delivered from the foresaid evil shall see my wonders. You're going to see that over there. So if you're going to be delivered from that, then you're going to hold on to something. Then you're going to hold on to something. So we need to make sure we have that token. The same token as it's saying right here in 19. And you'll see right here in 29. Because it's the things of the flesh you got to forsake. In Matthew chapter 19, verse 29, it says, everyone that have forsaken houses. Have you done that? You have forsaken everything that you do according to the flesh. You've forsaken these things in the flesh. For this man appeared to you poor. The Spirit only came to you with a promise. And you have forsaken your house, your body, or brethren, or sister, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or land, for my name's sake. Ye shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life. He's clear. That's clear. As they say, that's clear as a whistle. But that is the beginning of your sorrows. That is the beginning of your sorrows. Let me show you here. In 24, it tells you a little bit about what's going to go on. It tells you a little bit about what's going to go on. It says all these are the beginnings of sorrows. All these famines and all these things going to happen. These are the beginning of those. Because he want to test what you really going to do. What are you really like? And some of these things are going to happen to us. Some of these things is going to happen to us. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Gonna be killed for this. You know, the same as I can sit there and say, as many of us, is hated. It's hated. Because we just holding on to God. Just the word of God. Holding on to a promise. Holding on to a promise. A promise. And the same thing as it says here in John chapter 15, we need John chapter 15 in verse 21. And it says this, but all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not he that sent me. So, for this small little moment, he forsakes you. For this small moment, he did this. Because he had to sit there and see what you was really about. In Isaiah chapter 54, and picking it up at verse 7, he says this out of his own mouth. For a small moment I have forsaken thee. That's the end of the statement. For this small moment, he had to do this. He had to forsake us because he had to see showing up as a poor man and not showing up as this rich man. He had to forsake you of this to see what you was about. After thee. Out of his own mouth. And people will lie to you and say that's not true. And he's telling you this out of his own mouth. For that small moment, you're going to go through hell through this life. And you see these things where people will sit there and how they treat you. How people will treat you today and how people will continually treat you. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, I got to move this over again. So we're going to sit there for that small moment. You're going to deal with this. You're going to deal with this. But he's seeing what you're about. But he's going to show you something. Because once you leave here, once this life that you're in today, however long you're here, once you come to the end of that, remember, I show you a mystery. I show you a mystery. Remember that. I'm going to show you a mystery. We ain't all going to sleep. But shall be changed. Because now, once this body leaves here, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the trumpet sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. We shall be changed. He says this clear when you sit there and see here, because he had to forsake that for a moment. So, same thing we're going to see here. For this same thing we see here. In verse 7 it says, then the dust shall return to the earth as it was. In the twinkling of an eye. For that small moment. 1,000 years is one day to God, and one day is 1,000 years. So a lot of us might be here for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years. But for that small moment to God, this small moment, he had to forsake this flesh because he can't look upon flesh. He cannot look upon flesh. Actually, let's make sure we clear what my God has done. I want to make sure we clear here. Yeah, BB. Oh, this one B. I want to make sure you clear with what he's saying here. In Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 13. He can't do what people said there. Thou art pure eyes to behold evil. Thou canst look upon iniquity. He can't do this. So he's going to send word to you. And if you promise to be obedient to that word, when he come, he can gather you with those great mercies. This is what he can do. God. And the spirit shall return to God who gave it. This is why it's saying this way. For this one small moment, he's forsaken us. So it says this as we close in. John, we're going to go to John 14. We're going to look at this and see what's happening here. John 14, we're picking up at 1. It says, this. I thought I can get to 14. And I'm going to have to sit and reset some of these things. 14, he says this. He says, let not your heart be troubled. Don't let your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. If you believe in God, the creator of all things, Christ is saying, you believe also in me. Why did he say that? I'm going to show you why he says what he's saying. We're going to see everything that he did. Isaiah chapter 12 and picking it up at verse 2. 12 and 2. It says, remember, God is my salvation. If you believe God, believe in him. Because he's saying, God is my salvation. So we know that. And he's saying, he's not denying you don't know that. Who? Christ. Christ. He said, I will trust and not be afraid. For the Lord Jehovah, who is Christ, not God, the Spirit of God, is my strength and my song. He also become my salvation. Believe also in me too. Because I come from him. This is all he be telling you. He been telling us this the entire time. So now we know why he says what he says. He says this and make sure that we're clear now. That's why we know now it's more clear than ever. In Numbers chapter 23 and verse 19, it says, God is not a man that he should lie. Now we know he's not a liar. He promised us something. He promised us something. This is why he says this. This is why he says these things. So when we see this, we sit there and we know some things which is going on. Now we understand what's happening here. So now we know what he says here. When you look at John chapter 14, and he tells you, in my Father's house are many mansions. Now we know clearly what he's saying. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go and prepare a place for you. Now we know what he's talking about clearly. Clearly know what he's talking about. The house of the creators are many mansions. Not true, he would have told us. He going to prepare a place for us to put this spirit that we have. This promise that we kept with God. And he says this all the way verse 3. He says, and if I prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that you may be there also. That you may be there also. So we know this. He know you got to bear some things here. And these things we got to bear here, we know what we're going to be going through. In Revelation chapter 22, and that's why he says this in verse 14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they have right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates of the city. Now we know why. Now we know why. And in closing, I want you to see something, to really understand where he's coming from. In Idris chapter 5, we're going to 2nd Idris chapter 5, we're going to pick it up at verse 23. And it says, and said, O Lord, that bears rule, who controls everything, of every wood of the earth, and of all the trees thereof, they have chosen thee only one vine. He's getting somewhere to this. Verse 24, it says, and of all the lands of the whole world thou hast chosen one pit, and of all the flowers thereof one lily. He's telling you all this right up front. Goes on more in verse 25. He says, in all the depths of the sea thou hast filled thee one river, and of all the built cities thou hast hallowed Zion unto thyself. Wow. But he gets better. He gets better. And it says, and of all the fowls all the fowls that are created, thou hast named thee one dove. And of all the cattle are made, thou hast provided thee one sheep. Wow. It's beautiful what he says in 27. It's beautiful what he says in 27. Watch this. It says, in all the multitude of people thou hast gotten thee one people. One. This is what people have a problem with. And unto this people whom thou, now we know, promised, and giveth a law that is approved of all. You see, now he loved, now you know why he said he promised them. Why? Because he gave them what they needed to know. Let's look at it. Let's look at it all together. Because now everything's going to make sense for you. Why he made those promises. Genesis chapter 49, and you look at verse 2. It says, gather yourself together and hear ye sons of Jacob, but you're going to do what? You're going to hearken unto Israel your father. Really? Yeah. Now we know that. Because he gave them some instructions on what they need to do based on those promises. And he says this more when we look at Psalms. Psalms 147. 147. And we're going to sit there and see here. We're going to look at 19 and 20. 19 and 20. And it says, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He's telling you right there, the people he loved. He have not dealt so with any nation, and as for his judgment, they have not known him. Praise ye the Spirit of God. So the question always become, where's the issue? Where's the issue? It's lying over here in 28. Right here in 28, and we see that it says, and now, O Lord, why hast thou given this one people over unto many? and upon the one root thou hast prepared others? And why hast thou scattered thy only one people among many? So Uncle Idris is asking a clear question on why this happened. So why did you do this? This is a clear question. You can see he's asking the question. And we can get the answer. You're going to see what happened right here. Right here. It says, and they which did gainsay, meaning what? See, we need to know what this means. Gainsay. Because gainsay means contradict. So they which contradict thy promise, you see that right there, thy promises, declared them untrue, denied the promises, and did not believe the covenant. They trodden them down. You see that? You see, it's telling you all this right here. And believe not in thy covenant, and trodden them down. That's what they did. So now we know why. Now we understand what's going on. So when we look at this, we can clearly look at this as a whole now. So when we look at this, we'll go back to Ecclesiasticus chapter 27. And we're going to be closing, and we're going to look at this in Ecclesiastes chapter in verse 5. So this is why he had to do this. This is why he did what he did. See, they gainsay, we contradict what he said. So the furnace proveth the potter vessels. So the trial of man is in his reasoning. Exactly the point. That's exactly the point. See, the same way he takes coals, and he take coals and they spread them throughout the furnace. Same thing. When you go in the furnace, you got same thing. If you're going to barbecue, you're going to spread those coals across the whole pit, all over, not just in one spot. They got to be tested. The same as you see with Moses telling us. Exodus chapter 16. Chapter 16, verse 4. And it says this, and then said the Spirit of God unto Moses, remember, I rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them. You see that? He want to test you, whether they walk in my law or no. He got to prove us. He got to prove us clearly. So you remember this and never forget it. As he said here. Proverbs. We're going to go right back here. Chapter 8. In verse 17, I promised them that promised me. That's clear. You promised them that promised him. That's clear now. Don't get it flipping. Don't get it tripped out. Don't see, and many of us has that wrong. Oh, I love God, I love God, I love. Yeah, you just hollering, you just saying words. But he promised them that promised him. And you follow through. In Isaiah chapter 55, verse 6, it says this, it makes this clear. Seek ye the Spirit of God while he may be found. While he may be found. Call ye up upon him while he is near. This is clear. This is clear as day. So you remember this. In John chapter 14. Let me see if I can go here. I'll go to John 14. And we're going to sit there and we're going to see John 14. We're going to look at 14 and why he says what he says. If ye ask anything in my name, I will do it. So providing you seek in the name of salvation, he would do it. No matter what it is, he would do it. No matter what it is. See, and he tells you, and he gonna do it based on what? If ye promise me, see, you got to be doing something. If ye promise me, keep my commandments, and I do it. You do it. And if you promising, you got to be willing to lay down your life. Actually, let's show this last verse. Show this just to clear it out. 15:13. He says this. Greater love have no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. This is clear. Clear as day. So if that's something that you're going to do, then clear as day, that's what he will do for you. That's what he will do for you. Therefore, do the Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it up again. So hopefully that you guys have got some understanding from this teaching and clearly understand what is going on with this. As we were sitting there seeing what was happening, knowing what was being said, knowing what the truth is. Now I do have things before we do go in the back. I do have this this Jeremiah guy, which I truly believe this is one of the guys that was running around with this dude Anthony, where he's clearly a Christian. And I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna open this up because he's a hardcore Christian, but he keep coming over here and keep doing different things. So I'm gonna do something real quick before I even go in this class. I'm gonna go over to Zoom because I believe that is the guy. He say he's not him, but I believe he is him. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open up Zoom real quick, and I do want him to come back there. If you don't come back there, then I know exactly this is him. Because he comes in and he likes to speak like he know what he's talking about. And I'm going to set up a Zoom real quick to take care of this. And we doing this right now. And this for this guy Jeremiah, where he comes in. First he asks about a moderator. Then he came in, but these were some guys that was removed a while back because they act like they knew everything, and they got removed. But I'm putting this in here right now, and if he don't come back here, I know that's him. So what I did, I put in, if you refresh your page, you will clearly see in the bottom there, you'll clearly see in the bottom there, yeah, okay, got you. Yeah, but clearly right there, wait a minute, but I want to make sure, so if you do it, make sure you make sure you click on that. And I'm talking directly to Jeremiah. If you refresh your screen, you'll see a Zoom meeting there. And I know if you that hyena or not. So if you're not him, don't worry about it, but still come to the back. But with that, we still be picking up on Romans tomorrow, as well as I believe Deacon Micah is running the teaching tomorrow. But after this, I'm gonna go to the back for Zoom to meet him, to make sure we can get this thing straight, because he keeps showing up and he like to open his mouth a lot. And as he did, he was pumping some other things. So you click on that and come back there. We'll go from there. So hopefully that you guys enjoy what went on. And then once I meet there, then I might take a small tiny break, and then I'm gonna go into my Proverbs class. So with that, I hope that everyone was richly edified. And until next time, I say to each and every person, Shalom.